He was just a quiet old man, 90 years old, cane in hand, walking to the bakery like he had every Saturday for years, but when a group of teenagers shoved him into the street and laughed as he stumbled into traffic, they didn't know who they were touching. Could this push awaken a forgotten warrior? They didn't just push a man, they pushed a Marine, and 20 minutes later, when the boots came marching down that alley, our whole town remembered the line, "You never cross." This is a story about dignity, memory, and what happens when honor stands back up. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Saturday mornings in Ashton, North Carolina moved at their own pace. The streets were quiet, the bakery line was slow, even the breeze seemed polite, and me, I always sat on the bench across from Simmons Bakery every Saturday, same time, same spot, a paper cup of coffee warming my hands, and a quiet view of the town waking up. But I wasn't really there for the coffee, I was there for him, Walter Hayes, 90 years old, always in a dark coat, always with that cane, always walking like the sidewalk itself. Owed him respect, he never missed a Saturday, and he never once complained. He lived alone, just a few blocks down from the library I ran. We weren't close friends, Walter didn't keep many of those, but he was a fixture, someone you noticed if you care to look. He was one of those men the world forgets too quickly, a Marine, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, 3 wars, 3 lifetimes packed into one frail figure, but you'd never hear him bring any of it up. Walter was polite, quiet, the kind of man who tipped his hat to strangers and still said ma'am like it meant something, the kind of man who held a door open even when his hand shook doing it. That morning I saw him coming like always, slow, steady, leaning into his cane with the kind of resolve you don't teach in schools anymore. He was headed toward the bakery just like he always did, and that's when I saw them, a group of teenage boys, maybe 4 or 5, sprawled across the sidewalk in front of the shop. One had a speaker blasting music from his pocket, another tossed a soda bottle from hand to hand like it was some kind of sport. They weren't from this part of town, that much I could tell. Walter reached the corner and paused. He waited for a woman with a stroller to pass, tipped his head to her, then he approached the group. I couldn't hear everything from across the street, but I could see the way he spoke, gentle, respectful. I imagined he said something like, "Excuse me, fellas, mind if I pass?" They didn't move. One of them, tall kid, backwards ball cap, the kind of smirk you only earn from never being told no, stood up and blocked the path even more. I leaned forward on the bench. Walter tried again. The boy laughed loud enough that I heard it from across the street. Then came the shove. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't theatrical, it was casual, disrespectful, like swatting a fly. The boy stuck his leg out, pressed a hand to Walter's shoulder, and pushed, and just like that, Walter stumbled off the curb. I felt my breath catch. The bakery doors swung open behind the boys, but no one moved, no one said a word. Walter's cane slipped from his hand, a delivery van swerved just in time, horns blared, and somehow by muscle memory or pure luck, he caught his balance in the middle of the street. The boys, they laughed, one of them clapped the other on the back like it was the highlight of his week. I saw another pull out a phone like he wanted to record it. Walter stood there for a moment, rigid, trembling. Not from fear, from anger. I could see it in the way he squared his shoulders, in the way his lips pressed tight. The boys drifted off down a nearby alley, still laughing. No one followed, no one stopped them. A young woman finally ran out from the bakery and helped Walter back to the curb. She picked up his cane, asked if he was okay. Walter nodded once. "I've faced enemies," he said quietly, "who showed more honor than those boys." That line, it stuck with me ever since, because this wasn't just a stumble, it wasn't just a stupid prank, it was an insult to everything he had been, to everything he had given. And as I sat there on that bench, hands gripping my coffee a little tighter than before, I knew this was far from over. Could this disrespect summon a Marine response? Because the Marines may leave the battlefield, but they don't leave their own behind, not ever, and someone somewhere was about to remember that. Walter didn't leave, he just sat back down, same bench, same posture, but everything had changed. His cane rested across his lap, his hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from something older, deeper, and in his palm, I saw it, a small flip phone, outdated, scratched, but steady in his grip. He opened it, pressed a number from memory, no hesitation, no scrolling, just dialed. I couldn't hear what was said at first, only watched the way he leaned forward, the way his shoulders settled, not in defeat, but in resolve. Then I heard it. "This is Master Gunnery Sergeant Walter Hayes," he said, voice low but clear. "I need to speak to Sergeant Nicholas Ford at the recruiting office." My heart jumped a little. Nick Ford, I'd seen him a few times around town, young, clean-cut, jaw like it was carved from granite, ran the local Marine Corps recruiting station about 4 blocks east, always sharp, always moving, but this was the first time I heard Walter use that tone. It was like hearing a bell that hadn't rung in decades suddenly sing out again. He paused, waited, then said, "Yes, I'll hold." A few moments passed, the traffic returned to its usual hum, a dog barked somewhere behind the hardware store. Life tried to carry on, but Walter Hayes didn't move, and I didn't take my eyes off him. Then his voice again, quieter, lower. "Nick, It's Hayes, something happened, another pause, he didn't raise his voice, didn't let the rage speak for him, just told the truth, I was shoved into the street. Deliberately, a group of teenagers right in front of the bakery, he breathed through his nose, calm, they laughed, walked away, no one intervened, a longer pause, I'm not asking for revenge, he said, but I thought the Corps should know a Marine was disrespected on American soil, broad daylight in the town he calls home. Silence followed, and then I swear I heard the voice on the other end sharpen instantly, even from where I sat. Understood, Master Gunnery, came the response, we'll handle it. That was it. Walter closed the phone slowly, slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat, then he leaned back, and for the first time since the shove, I saw something in his eyes that didn't look like pain, it looked like expectation, like he was waiting for something he knew deep in his bones was already in motion. And me, I sat there, coffee long gone cold, unsure of what I had just witnessed, but I could feel it in the air, something had shifted, the kind of silence that comes just before thunder. Across the street, the boys were still laughing, they'd moved on, wandered down behind Mateo's Pizza. That alley was their hangout, half shaded by ivy, filled with old crates, spray-painted dumpsters, and the sort of emptiness teenagers think belongs to them. I'd seen them there before, more times than I could count. This time, though, they had no idea what was coming. Could this alley hold a reckoning? Walter stayed seated, didn't check the time, didn't fidget, he just sat still. 10 minutes passed. Then 15, then I heard it before I saw it, the sharp crunch of boots on pavement, a rhythm, steady, deliberate, then the first figure came into view, Sergeant Nicholas Ford, dressed in service Charlie's, tan shirt, dark green trousers, cover crisp and squared, he walked like the road itself made way for him. Behind him came more 8 Marines, some older, some younger, one looked barely out of high school, another had the build of a linebacker, but every single one of them had the same posture, straight. Silent, purposeful, no shouting, no barking orders, just motion, controlled, commanding. They didn't enter the bakery, they didn't ask for directions, they walked straight past me toward the alley. 2 broke off and took up positions on either end, cutting off any easy exit. The rest followed straight into the dim passage behind the pizza shop. From where I sat, I couldn't see what happened next, but I could hear it. The laughter died first, then a silence, then Ford's voice, not yelling, not scolding. Just cutting, precise, cold as steel. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone I'd heard it once before in a documentary about boot camp. It was the tone of a man who had the weight of history behind every syllable, and whoever those boys thought they were about to learn who they'd really messed with. Walter sat calmly, didn't flinch, didn't even smile, he just watched the mouth of the alley, his expression unreadable. Me, I sat beside a cold cup of coffee and a growing understanding. That moment, that quiet Saturday morning, that shove, that call, it had all led to this, and it wasn't about vengeance, it was about honor. A line had been crossed, and the Corps had come to draw it back, in boots, in silence, and in the name of the man who sat still and waited like a Marine. From my bench, I couldn't see into the alley, but I didn't need to, because what I could see, what everyone on Main Street yet could see, was what the Marines looked like as they entered and what those boys looked like when they came out. It didn't take long, 6 minutes, maybe 7, no yelling, no scuffle, no sirens, just that same deliberate silence that hung over everything like a storm cloud refusing to break. Inside, it began with Sergeant Ford's voice. It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. That voice, it carried, clear, measured, like every word was chosen ahead of time and sharpened until it could cut through concrete. All of you, he said, stand up right now. Then silence. I imagined them stumbling to their feet, caught between defiance and fear, not yet sure how badly they'd misjudged the situation. Then Ford's tone shifted, lower, colder. You think you shoved an old man? Another pause. You shoved history, and I felt it, the shift, not just in the alley, but in them. You don't hear a man like Nick Ford and forget what he says, you carry it. It echoes. He's not just someone's grandpa, he continued, he's a Marine who bled for this country. While you were learning to tie your shoes, he was watching his friends die beside him. Still no yelling, but now every word sounded like it was being etched in stone. Men like him didn't fight so you could play tough guy on a street corner, they fought so you could be better than this. There was a silence I'll never forget, and then another voice, one of the younger Marines, calm but firm. You think strength is pushing someone smaller than you? He let the question sit. Let me tell you what strength is. I couldn't hear the rest, but I didn't need to, because just a minute later, the first boy came out. Tyler, I think his name was, the one with the backwards cap. Only now he wasn't smirking, he wasn't laughing, he looked different, small, like a balloon that had been punctured and was slowly leaking out every ounce of bravado. His face was pale, his hands trembled just slightly. Behind him came the others. Chase, Darnell, a boy in a green hoodie I didn't recognize. All of them moved the same, slow, stunned, eyes fixed on the ground, not a word between them. They didn't run, didn't protest, they just walked, not toward anywhere in particular, just away, like they needed distance from what had just happened and from who they'd just been. They looked like they'd stared into something bigger than them and come out the other side unsure if they were still whole, and in a way, I think they had. Then the Marines emerged, still in formation, still Composed, Gunny Ford walked last, his cover perfectly centered, his posture still rigid. He paused just outside the alley, turned to face Walter, who was still seated on the bench across from me, and brought his right hand to his brow, a perfect salute. Walter stood slowly, deliberately. He returned the gesture, not shaky, not frail, but with the kind of weight only a man who's earned it could carry. Their hands dropped in unison. Ford stepped forward. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Hayes," he said, loud enough for the crowd that had now quietly gathered along the sidewalk to hear. "The situation has been addressed." Walter gave a single nod. "Nothing more, nothing less," Ford added, voice quieter now. "They've received a thorough orientation on the values of honor, courage, and commitment." Then just a hint of steel in his tone, with special emphasis on what it means to respect those who served before them. Walter's mouth twitched at the corner. Not quite a smile, but enough. "No thanks necessary," Ford said. "We take care of our own." And then he turned to his unit. "All right, Leathernecks," he called, "fallen back to the station." And just like that, they turned, boots crisp on pavement, back straight. No more words. The town had grown silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. I watched them disappear down Main Street, tall shadows moving together like they had always belonged here. And maybe they did, because in that moment, Ashton didn't feel like just another quiet town. It felt like a place where values still had a voice, where silence could be dignity and action didn't need to be loud to be heard. Walter sat back down, cane across his knees, eyes on the fading line of uniforms. I looked at him and I saw it plain as day. Not just an old man, not even just a Marine, but a reminder that some things, honor, memory, sacrifice, don't die, not as long as we stand up for them. When the last Marine disappeared down the block and the dust had settled, the street returned to stillness, but it wasn't the same. It felt cleaner somehow, like something had been restored. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Walter Hayes, straight back, silent, looking out over the town that had almost forgotten him. Gunny Ford lingered a moment longer. He walked back across the street, past me toward Walter. The others had already turned the corner, but Ford, he knew this wasn't over until it was done right. He stopped 2 feet in front of Walter, then stood to attention. And what happened next? Well, I'd never seen anything like it. Gunny Ford, a man 30, maybe 40 years younger, snapped his heels together and raised his right hand to his brow, not casually, not politely, but with full military precision, with respect, a salute so crisp and reverent, it made me straighten in my seat. Walter didn't move at first, then slowly he rose, not rushed, not forced. He stood the way only a Marine who had earned every inch of his rank could stand. Then he returned the salute, his hand steady, his fingers exact. And in that moment, every wrinkle, every scar, every silent mile he had walked, all of it carried weight. It wasn't just a gesture between two men, it was a transfer of memory, a recognition that some uniforms may be folded away, but the honor they represent never goes out of service. Ford let his hand drop. Walter did the same. Neither said a word. They didn't need to. Ford nodded once quietly, then turned and walked away. No fanfare, no applause, just the quiet sound of duty fulfilled. The days that followed were different. You could feel it. The boys, those same teens who thought they ruled the alley, kept their heads low, started picking up trash around the courthouse, held the door for old Mrs. Kilpatrick at the pharmacy. No one told them to, but everyone noticed. As for Walter, he kept walking to the bakery every Saturday, still in that same dark coat, still with his cane. But now things changed. People waved more, they paused to say hello, the mailman offered to carry his bag. One morning, someone left a bus of oranges at his door with a note that simply said, "Thank you for your service." And outside the Marine recruiting station, every time Walter passed, the young men standing post would snap to attention, back straight, hands raised in salute. And Walter, he never broke stride, just gave a slight nod, a tilt of the head, enough, because honor doesn't shout, it doesn't have to, but just waits quietly, patiently to be recognized. I wrote all this down in the library bulletin the following week, typed it out slowly, printed it myself, taped it to the wall next to the community board, right beneath the flyer for lost kittens and the Sunday potluck schedule. I didn't write it as news, I wrote it as record, because some things need to be kept, remembered. And at the end of the piece, I wrote just one line: there are things that cannot be shoved off a curb, dignity, memory, and the quiet presence of those who once stood between us and chaos. This morning, I watched Walter again. Just like every Saturday, he walked a little slower these days, but his steps still had that rhythm, that purpose. And when he reached the sidewalk in front of the recruiting station, 2 young Marines in dressed uniform straightened from their posts. Salute. Walter glanced at them, nodded once, and kept walking. He didn't need to stop, didn't need to speak, because respect, the kind that's earned in silence, paid in blood, and handed down through salutes, doesn't beg for recognition, it just waits until someone remembers. And in our little town of Ashton, North Carolina, we finally did. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.